or what more can I learn? What new exercise can I do? What can I do conditioning wise? What can I do dietary? What can I do strategy wise? X's and O's, sit with the coaches, watch more video. So if you take that attitude with your faith and say, okay, like I'm proud of where I am practicing my faith, but what more can I do? What can I improve on? What can I add? Then you're right. Then you're not just sitting still and being content with where you are and not growing.
Welcome to the Catholic Table Talk podcast. This is where everything Catholic is on the table. New episodes Thursdays at 9 a.m. Eastern on most podcast platforms. Here's your host, William Sauber.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode here at Catholic Table Talk podcast. Great to have you aboard for episode 235. And today we have a guest coming back on the show. He has been on for a little bit, so I've been kind of keeping tabs on him and on his show. And as you know, I'm really excited about kind of the show, this episode, because I love sports. Right? I mean, you probably heard it multiple times when I said, it's either doing a podcast on the Catholic faith or doing a podcast on sports. Now, if you know me really well, which I think quite a few of you do who listen a lot, is that I'm a big Minnesota Vikings fan, so I could talk about the Vikings all day long. Especially when this episode is released, it's actually the NFL's draft, right? But we know that supporting your favorite sports team, even though it's great entertainment and it really helps, maybe somewhat brings families together, it's not what's going to get you to heaven. And sometimes we need to make those sacrifices to give up those things and other sacrifices in our daily lives throughout the day to really, truly be who are meant to be and strive towards heaven. So we have Bruce Wawrzyniak from Catholic Sports Radio, and he was on a few episodes ago, episode 178, excuse me. And we talked about God and sports and what happens if you start to maybe place one before, sports before God. What does that happen? And I reached out to Bruce, and he said, yeah, let's do it again. And I really like the topic. Again, it's just making sacrifices, like, again, coaches, players, ordinary people who play sports do, to really, to be active in that sport particularly. And so it's going to be a great show. So Bruce, thank you again, sir, for your time and your commitment, your ministry, and your willingness to come back on Catholic Table Talk.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you for asking me to come back.
Awesome. Absolutely. Yes. It's like I said, I've been keeping tabs on you, and you've been having a lot of great guests on the show. A lot of cool stories, that maybe get overlooked. So just let's start right there. Just how have you been? How has your show been? What exciting news about your show you want to talk to us about?
Well, I'll tell you, you have to, as you know, and it's kind of like being a parent, right? Not choose favorites. And
Sure.
So I will just cite some recent guests. It doesn't mean that I'm singling them out as being better than others, but if your audience is looking to come to Catholic Sports Radio, maybe some of these names that I mentioned will get their interest up. But I was very fortunate to recently talk to Britta Curl-Salemi. She just won a gold medal in February over at the Olympics in Italy with the U.S. women's hockey team. And
Wow.
I loved that we did get to do what my show does, which is bring out the faith side of her in particular, because that team, their profile was raised so high, fittingly enough, by the traditional sports media for what they do on the ice. And you did such a wonderful job in your introduction of setting up the audience to say that, sure, those things are great, but, and I think what was most fascinating about that interview is she is someone who had a lot of success in college. I think she won 3 national championships at Wisconsin. And now she's playing in the PWHL, the Professional Women's Hockey League, and goes over to Italy and wins the gold medal. And she told me during our interview that you get to those points and then you go, so what's next? Is that it? We won and it's great, but time to go back to our normal lives, our whatever city we're based in, and just kind of pick things back up. And it really was a wonderful testimony to the fulfillment that we can get all the time from our Catholic faith. You don't get to a point where there's a pinnacle and then you go, okay, well, that's over with. So now what? And so I thought that her testimony in particular was wonderful. Gavin Doty, he just played in the NCAA men's basketball tournament for Siena. Now, he talks on our interview about the fact that he's transferring to Syracuse, but Siena is a Catholic college, Franciscan university. And so he did talk about, there's a lot of presence of the Catholic faith there, but his roots themselves, this guy, when you hear it, he's far more interested in talking about his faith than he is about basketball. And this is someone who nobody will be surprised if he ends up in the NBA in the next couple of years. So I just love these guests that are so on fire for their faith that you think that, I shouldn't say this about my own ministry, but you think that they're going to get annoyed if you just ask them question after question after question about their faith. And they're thrilled to talk about it instead of hockey question after hockey question in Britta's case, or basketball question after basketball question in Gavin's case.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it's very easy to fall into that, prideful, boastful trap of just really talking about yourself, and, and not really, going back to the faith. And that's really cool. And,
because I think you hear that expression, winning isn't the only thing, it's everything. And so here's Britta testifying to the fact that it's not everything that you think it would be. Yes, it's great. And she wasn't saying, I got nothing out of it. But to hear her say that her real fulfillment comes from her Catholic faith is just such powerful testimony, because as you said at the beginning, before you even brought me on, we do put far too much weight on the importance of sports and far too much weight on being the champion, because you could have won a Stanley Cup back in 1975. And what does that mean now, 51 years later?
Right. Who remembers almost? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, awesome. Happy for that. So because people ask me, Bruce, how did you get that guest on? Because that was so cool. That guest was so cool. How did you find him? How did you get him on? And I think we talked about this last episode too. And you just basically how do you can you just go a little bit more into that again? Like, how do you find them? What does that process look like?
Yeah, and so sadly, since you and I last spoke, I lost my dad, and my dad used to be my number one listener. He used to listen to Catholic Sports Radio all the time. I'm bringing this up because he would always ask me, I listened to the latest interview. How'd you get that guy? How'd you get that girl? He always wanted to know how I was getting all these guests. And, there's really a combination of factors. And before I kind of list what some of those resources are, I will say that it is so rewarding to see more athletes nowadays who are being much more open about their Catholic faith. We've had a lot of Christians for many years, going back to the Jeremy Lins and the Tim Tebows of the world, that did used to draw a lot of attention to being a Christian. But it's really nice to see so many Catholics who are starting to make this more public now. And so that makes my job a little bit easier in terms of starting to try to identify people. I definitely want to give my wife some credit, because she has been a big help. Sometimes I will kind of look at someone and scratch my head. And if she's next to me, I'll say, I just can't tell if they're Catholic though. And she'll go right to it. Or we'll be watching a game together and she'll see whatever athlete it is make the sign of the cross, and she'll say, did you see that? Did you see that? They must be Catholic. And right away she'll get on her phone and look them up. So that is one way. I do, because there is the Catholic Sports Radio Instagram account, I do have opportunities on Instagram to come across people, who fit the profile of the guests that I'm looking for on my show. They have to be a practicing Catholic, and they have to be a current or former athlete, coach, referee, umpire, clergy, administrator, whatever. And so, as we know, so many people like to talk down about the algorithm when it comes to social media. But in this case, it's beneficial because Instagram will show me people who are practicing Catholics, or they'll show me people who are athletes. And it doesn't take a ton of time for me to kind of, do a couple of taps on my phone to drill down and find out if they meet both of those criteria. And honestly, one of my favorite ways to get guests on the show is from people who I interview. We finish the interview, I press stop on the recording, and it'll be a case of, hey, you mentioned during our interview so and so, and clearly I could tell that he or she is Catholic. Are you in touch with them? Can you connect me with them? So that's always been a really great resource, is the guests themselves telling me about other guests that they know of that they think would be a good fit.
Yes, that always helps a good reference. That is for sure. So I mean, first of all, again, like I said, I'm sorry about your dad for your loss. That's
Thank you.
especially it's tough. So, what condolences to you. And I mean, my brother does the same thing like your wife. It's like if we're watching a baseball game, Bruce, he's like, "Oh, is that a crucifix? You see a crucifix on him?" And it's like, "Oh, yep, I do." Okay, so yeah, like you said, it's pretty cool how you can kind of pick that out on television.
Yeah, I've always said that, there are certain kind of buzzwords or topics that make two strangers kind of unite a lot faster. Sometimes it's, oh, you went to the same college that I did. And people really seem to bond over being an alumni of the same school.
Sure.
And I've noticed that that's something unique about our Catholic faith, is that you can meet a complete stranger, and the minute you find out that they also are Catholic, it's kind of like you let your guard down, and it just becomes this real quick in to talk a lot faster and easier than someone that you say, oh boy, to yourself, I'm really struggling to come up with something here. I don't know this person. And, sadly, it's unfortunate that in our society, the first thing people go to in conversation with a stranger is they'll go, so Bill, what do you do? And they make it all about someone's job. We're not defined by our work, and we should not be. And so when something can come up, such as Catholic faith, and you're talking about being a believer, that I just think there's so much more enrichment in that than telling people what your 9 to 5 is.
Yeah, truthfully, because I mean, you can only talk about your 9 to 5 so much, and then that gets boring, and maybe they get heated because they have a bad day, a couple bad weeks before Christmas at work or something, and it's just like, yeah, and it's not really a good solid platform to base your conversation around. It's not something that we should be doing. So totally
Yeah,
agree.
especially if it's unrelatable, or you know nothing about it, then you're
Yeah.
kind of forced into that awkward spot of either faking your way through it or
Right.
having to ask so many questions that the person thinks, why did I even go into this?
Yeah, definitely. So good, really good. So with talking about sacrifices today, and I don't know if I'm gonna start this off with this because again, like I mentioned in the intro, is that we all make sacrifices, whether that if you're a family person, your husband, your wife, um, if you're a grandparent, foster home, whatever. You all make sacrifices, and especially, I mean, sports players. And one in particular, Bruce, that I just recently saw, I'm sure you're probably aware of this, is that Catholic shortstop Bobby Witt Jr. recently just got confirmed because in the Catholic faith, he didn't come to the faith. He was already in the faith for the arts, but he had his actual confirmation, like people like I did when I was in junior high school. But he couldn't do it in high school because his schedule was all about baseball. He didn't have time for it. See, I mean, that's not really, I guess. So I guess my point is that's pretty cool. I didn't know he was a Catholic, but we all make sacrifices. And coaches make sacrifices to coach maybe in the summer, summer cap or something. Maybe not getting paid, but they're offering their time. They take some time away from family. Players sacrifice maybe, playing a different position than they want, or maybe playing with an injury. You make a sacrifice for the team. But how can we kind of attain that type of sacrifice? How can we what type of sacrifices can we make in our daily lives? Which again, we're all laity. I mean, people who play sports, they're not really over us. I mean, we all play sports probably some point in our lives. But what kind of sacrifices can we make in our daily lives in or outside of the penitential seasons like Advent or Lent?
Yeah, and I'm glad you tacked that on at the end, because many years ago, there was a priest at my parish who talked about sacrifices during Lent and really kind of rammed home the point to all of us that when we think of sacrifices, the only thing we think of is giving something up.
Hmm.
And the point that he ultimately made was, look, if you're coming to church every Sunday, then why not? And these are my words today, not what he said back then, but essentially he was saying, why not sacrifice some of your time during the week to come to daily mass? And he said, even if it's just one day a week, now you're coming Sunday and whatever this other day was. And I really took that to heart. And that Lent, I started saying, I'm going to do that. I'm going to come to morning mass every Thursday, kind of quote unquote midweek,
Sure.
and never stopped. And I think that was kind of the point, is like you're implying, there's these sacrifices that we think of, but they're only temporary. When you hear of someone that goes on a diet, they say, well, I'm going to try this for 30 days, or I'm going to try to
Right.
lose 10 pounds, or once I hit a certain weight, and then you have to change. I'm not a sports nutritionist or anything like that, but the fact of the matter is, there are sacrifices that we can make that can be not giving something up. So, in other words, if it's an add on, if it's, well, usually I drive to work every morning and I listen to the news, I listen to news talk radio, or I listen to, the country station. Well, maybe use that time instead, sacrifice listening to country music so that you can listen to Catholic Sports Radio, so you can listen to your show, so you can
Right.
listen to some, or give it up altogether in terms of I'm not going to listen to anything. I'm going to devote this time for prayer. And depending on how long your ride is, maybe you pray an entire rosary on your ride to work. So I think that sometimes we need to consider, what can I add? And I know that sounds challenging to people, because we all claim that, oh, I'm so overburdened right now, there's no room in my day to add anything to it. Well, number one, you don't have to answer to me, you have to answer to him. So if you're making
Right.
excuses to put worldly things before God, then you do need to make a sacrifice in something there. And again, it's not adding something, it's replacing something. And I think if you kind of did an accounting of your time management throughout the day, you'd see a window where you can say, okay, you know what? I have time here that I can devote to prayer. Maybe I can go. There was a time many years ago when I would leave the job that I was working at. I would leave at lunchtime and I would drive over to the local parish. It wasn't my parish, but it was a local Catholic church. And I would just sit in prayer for the better part of my lunch hour and then go back to work.
Right. Yeah. Well said. I mean, good ideas and good thoughts, because, I mean, like, yeah, we're supposed to be living the Catholic faith every day of our lives, every day is a new beginning, every season. And I mean, Fridays especially, there still are days of penance. So, I mean, Fridays for sure take something up. But
Yeah,
yeah,
and if you find yourself sitting up at night saying, "Oh, usually before I go to bed, I usually just sit in bed for half an hour and just kind of surf my phone, just kind of winding things down, and nothing that I really have to concentrate on." Well, there's some great time right there, that you
right,
can spend in prayer, that you could, go into the Bible, something that's a lot more productive than, I'm just kind of surfing for the sake of winding my day down.
right. Yeah, because that usually, I mean, just based on experience, Bruce, that kind of just leads to, you know, sadness or and loneliness. Because usually, if you go on social media, you kind of you see other people's days and how their day was, and maybe you feel kind of bad because your day wasn't that good or something, and you kind of get sad. And that's not the way you should be when you're going to try and make it to sleep. You should be
Yeah,
thanking God
you're
for a beautiful day.
you're falling into envy.
Yep.
You're looking at someone else and saying, wow, it looks like a great vacation. Sure wish I could do that. And so all of a sudden you're falling victim to envy instead of going to prayer and giving thanks, taking an
Right.
accounting of your day and offering up to God, where you want to try to do better the next day, what you're thankful for in the day that you just had.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And for me, I mean, just personally, for like little sacrifices, I mean, it's usually like, yeah, it's more prayer time in the car, or it's more prayer time at work. If I can listen to some music or something at work, it's trying to be a little more, whether it's divine office or praying or doing, having another rosary on, doing that type of stuff instead of listening to, hard rock or something all the time, right? So, yeah, it's really, really agree with you there. And so, kind of switching gears, I mean, because again, you might see some, like I said, you might see a lot of sacrifices that sports players and other people do, right? You see a little sacrifice, he's like, oh, that's very nice. Oh, he had to, you know, be taken out of the game so that someone else coming in and play. Okay. But we all know about big sacrifices. And so, what are some big sacrifices that we could do daily? I mean, maybe it's, like, and I'll give one example. Like, my brother and I, after Let, or during Let, the last part of Let, we're like, well, we like watching, like one of the late shows, but maybe if you don't have to watch it every single night, kind of giving that up and giving that more time to family time or to God, like you were saying. That's maybe a bigger sacrifice. So if you have a small sacrifice and you want maybe start with one smaller and have one bigger one, which ones would you suggest?
Yeah, and I like that you just mentioned family time, because I think, again, if you kind of do that self audit and you take yourself out of being front and center and say, well, I know that this is a show that I like to watch, but let's face it, in this day and age with things being on demand, do you really have to watch it in that moment? Is there something that will make someone in your family feel more loved, make them feel like they are a priority because you thought of them and said to yourself, right? Because you don't do it for
Right.
the credit, you do it because that's kind of the way that we're called to be, right? Is to be sacrificial in our behavior. And so if you decide no here and you hand that person the remote, or you just change the channel and say, I know this is something that you like to watch, and you just do it and you don't look for the thanks, that's huge, because you spend so much time with your family, and in order to achieve that peace and harmony, these things may not seem like a big deal in the moment that they're happening, but over time, there is going to be that sense of I'm here for you. I'm not here for myself. And so I think you hit the nail on the head by talking about family. If there's a shared vehicle in the family and you're just going out to do something that's not time sensitive, it's not a critical errand, it's not something that absolutely has to get done in that moment, and you stop yourself from getting the keys so that someone else can use the car, same principle applies. They're going to appreciate that the car was available for them, or gosh, it's been needing an oil change for a long time. You just take the keys and you just go and you get the oil changed, and you don't come back with your hand out saying, okay, you owe me for a third of the oil change or half of the oil change. These things, that they're just small gestures that show love, and that's what we're called to do. And I think when we think about showing love to other people, we think of kind of, the commercial or the stereotypical ways. And these little things that we'll do along the way, you go out and you get yourself a Starbucks, we'll bring something home for your brother, for your mom, for whoever. And those little things will show love that you were thinking of them when you made these decisions.
Right. And when you were saying about the remote, Bruce, I was thinking about my mom in my head because usually she says, "Okay, here's a remote, Billy. Change it to wherever you want." I'm like, "Okay, sweet." Click, 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 and then, but a couple of times, yeah, I flipped it back to her. I'm like, "No, you can watch wherever you want." And it's not like, and yeah, like you said, sometimes you get thanks, and sometimes you get the look like, "What? You serious?" I'm like, "Yeah, you can watch it." So, like I said, you're not looking for the praise, but yeah, you get sometimes you get um you almost feel more grateful that you did it because you're like you kind of made their day. It's kind of like you wait serious like, and it's just like you have a good laugh over it or something. So yeah, I truly agree. That brought back that image of my mom and I. So
Yeah, to bring back that word that Britta Curl Salemi used, there's a
yeah,
lot of fulfillment that you'll find in doing that for someone else.
definitely, absolutely. So so this question, Bruce, is kind of not really off, but something I want to ask before I ask the other one. Next one is that since we're in the season that we're in right now in the sports world, right? You got the NFL draft, you got in the off season there, you got the NBA finals, NHL finals, the pro professional National Women's Hockey League playoffs, I should say. It's basically playoffs. Like all the sports, the 4 or 5 major sports are really wrapped up, right? They're all full swing. What is your favorite time of the year? What is your favorite sports, I should say, and your favorite like playoff? Is it hockey? Is it basketball?
Yeah, it's hockey.
Okay,
Because I live in Tampa Bay, we've been very
that's
blessed
right.
here to have a team that has, I mean, 3 Stanley Cups if you go back to the first one in the early part of the century, but
Right.
then the 2 more recently, and just a super competitive team year after year that you can count on to make the playoffs. I think it's 9 years in a row that they've made the playoffs now, and so this is always an exciting time of year. As much as I firmly believe in my Catholic sports radio ministry, I'm only human, and I do get caught up in the excitement of watching the games and being nervous and like
Right.
anybody else, not wanting the team to get eliminated. At the
Yep.
same time, it's also um, this is also a time of year when baseball is just starting, and so just like every other city in the league, I start with optimism that the Tampa Bay Rays, maybe they'll climb back to the top of the American League East. As you and I are recording this, they are at the top of the American League East, and it's a very long season. But it's always fun at the start of the year to say everybody's 0-0. My team stands just as good a chance as anybody. And I'm also there's a lot more to the Rays. They have a lot to do with how my wife and I came to meet. But because there's the talk of a new stadium being built here in Tampa, that's very much on my radar. So as much as I'm absolutely dialed into the Lightning in the NHL playoffs, I'm also very concentrated on the Rays on and off the field.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's I'm a we're big Twins fans here, and Twins are doing pretty good so far, and especially springtime right now in Minnesota, and it's really good. And I do have to say, hopefully the Wild make it a little farther this year. Hopefully it's not maybe win a game and that's it. So, but I was gonna kind of play off of that question with, you know, is so much is it so like we talked about last episode, Bruce, is that we make sports sacrifices a lot more serious than we feel like faith holy sacrifices. Like for example, NFL draft. So I have the first day of the NFL draft off of work. I took it off. It's like a national holiday. I mean, I'm off of work. I'm gonna get all set for it all day, and we have a big party, and we're gonna have a great time with family. We're gonna watch it, blah blah, which is okay. I mean, watching the family, okay, fine. But if I would say, you know what, it's Good Friday. I still work. I'm not gonna take it off. It, why do we? What do you think? In your opinion, Bruce? Why do we make sports sacrifices easier than holy ones?
Well, in no particular order, I feel like society has conditioned us to be so connected to sports all the time, right? So a
Yeah,
lot of people are very loyal to their faith, but it's just every Sunday for them. And
true.
so that during the week time, it is easy to drift apart and say, of course I got to take today off. The NFL draft starts today. and not realize that you're getting caught up in that type of behavior. And so it becomes a problem, because what starts to build on it is, well, now all of a sudden, since the major sports leagues have embraced sports betting, now all of a sudden you've got whatever betting app on your phone, and now you got a lot of money on the game, because now it's a big deal. Now it is the playoffs. Now it is the finals. Now it is whatever. And you're saying, oh boy, if this bet comes through, I could really stand to win a lot. I'm too nervous. This is huge. I'm going to take the day off. And there's also something to be said for, when you do it one time, it makes it easier to do it the second time, because now you've kind of set a precedent. And so you all of a sudden find yourself, and especially if you work from home, then it gets dangerous if you don't have that discipline, because now you'll walk away from your desk and go sit in front of the TV, or you'll walk away from your desk and go to the Twins game or go to the Rays game and say, I only answer to myself. If you're in business for yourself, or if it's not something where you're constantly in touch with your boss all the time. And so I think I think the Billy Saubers of the world, I think the Bruce Wawrzyniaks of the world, I think those of us who are doing what we're doing need to help encourage our brothers and sisters in Christ that, hey, you need to be making the sacrifice for your faith and not for sports. I hate to say it, but sports is going to let you down at some point. I shouldn't say this, but just because I brought it up, you will lose that bet, and that's going to feel horrible. Your team will get bounced from the playoffs, and that's going to feel horrible too. You may be a young student athlete who gets cut from the team, or maybe you don't get cut, but maybe you're playing a sport where you finish college and that's it. You're done playing sports. So there's a lot of disappointment to be had in sports. And look at these sacrifices that you're making for what? To what end? Where does ultimately the joy come from? And maybe you could say, oh, but it's a thing I do with my brother. We get together and we watch the draft and we order pizza and whatever. Sure, I'm sure it's enjoyable, but once that starts to get out of hand and you're doing it for now it's the baseball all-star game. Well, I take the day of the baseball all-star game off, because even though it's at night, we get ready for it all day long. And now it starts to be this pattern of behavior where it's become so easy for you to make these excuses. And then if it was, let's fast forward, maybe it's as high up as your parish priest, that's having the conversation with you. Oh, that sounds like a lot of fun. That sounds like a lot of fun. But what are you doing in your faith life? And if the answer is, what do you mean?
Right.
Then obviously you've kind of gone down the wrong road. So I think society has made it, I don't want to say so much of a priority, but let's face it, you could turn on, ESPN has grown to so many different networks, so many different channels.
Oh yeah.
And in the Catholic faith, we have EWTN, and then sure, there's those of us that have podcasts, but you can find sports all over the place all day long. Fox Sports, you can go through all the different networks that do it. And it's just so darn accessible that I think that's something that poses a challenge to us that we do have to work through, and not make sure that, and make sure that we're not embracing it and saying, great, I can get my sports fix any time of day. Well, guess what? You can also pray any time of day, or you can go to a podcast, or you can go to the Bible, or you can, and there are apps, that you can download to engage with your Catholic faith instead of engaging with more statistics.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I like what you said too about, how your sports is going to let you down. It doesn't matter who you cheer for. You could be cheering for the one, like the Dodgers. You could be cheering for the Patriots back in their prime. You could be cheering, it's going to let you down. When you think you're unstoppable, they're going to let you down. And your faith will, never let you down. So no, 100% agree. And like you mentioned, just all the stations, all the channels. People are more willing to spend $100 a month on all these other sports channels and everything, all these streaming stuff to watch all the games, and yet they're throwing in, maybe $10 in the collection box, once a week, or they're not giving to local food shelves or other stuff. It's way more financially too, which is we gotta straighten that out too as a society. So yeah.
Great point. Yeah, all the money that you are spending in the betting app, and
Yeah.
then the collection basket comes around and you just pass it right down to the next person without putting anything in.
Right. Yeah. Well said. That is very true. So like how I mean we should push ourselves, right? And and God lets us be tested, or invites us to kind of go beyond what we feel comfortable with, sacrifices or just daily lives, reaching out to one another. Just like how far how far should we look to make those sacrifices daily, especially if we're looking for like a new habit or maybe it's a new sacrifice at first, but we're trying to build that into a habit. How far should we look?
There was a time when I went to mass. It was being said by my spiritual director, and during his homily, he said, instead of WWJD, I like to add on to it. And he said, I would prefer that we say, what would Jesus do for the Father? Which is, he would do anything for him. And so I'm going a roundabout way to answer your question by saying, if we are saying, how far should I go? That means that you're looking for someone to give you a limit. You're looking for
Yeah.
someone to say, well, just do that. And that's enough. It's more than you're doing now. There's a term, an examen, that's what you're supposed to do at night. The examen is to look back and reflect on your day. What are you thankful for? What could you have done better? Where did you see God in your day? Right? If you go through those kind of things, if you go through those 3 exercises in your examen, that's where you're going to find these opportunities. And if you ask yourself, what more can I do for the Father? That's where you'll start to find your answers. If it's whimsical, if it is, as you said earlier on in our conversation, if it is just for Lent, what can I do for the Father just for Lent? Well, why only in those 40 days? So I think that, yes, any step that you make is more than you're doing now, and that's a wonderful start. It shouldn't be the end.
Like, yeah, by no means. So because is it something like if you're not moving forward, if you're not doing more, then you're basically doing less. Like basically, if you're not gaining traction and trying to become more holy and making sacrifices and all that, you're basically going the other direction because you're actually withering and you're subduing to the other things, the worldly things, instead of your faith. So yeah,
Yeah, I mean, let's make a sports comparison, right? Look at someone like
there you
Tom
go.
Brady, who played until he was 45. Tom Brady
Right.
never got content and said, I mean, clearly I'm good enough. Look at all I've done. He was always challenging himself to do more. What more can I learn? What new exercise can I do? What can I do conditioning wise? What can I do dietary? What can I do strategy wise? X's and O's, sit with the coaches, watch more video. So if you take that attitude with your faith and say, okay, I'm proud of where I am practicing my faith, but what more can I do? What can I improve on? What can I add? Then you're right. Then you're not just sitting still and being content with where you are and not growing.
Right. No, I like that. Yeah, Tom Brady. Yeah, I mean he. I don't know. I think if he put a jersey back on today, Bruce, I think he would still not be content because he would still be, yeah. I mean, he's not like, okay, I'm Tom Brady, so let's, you guys build a team around me or whatever. It's no, yeah, he would definitely do it. I
Yeah.
definitely like that. Good point. So, I guess I want to kind of throw this question out there. I know this is kind of again out the blue question for you, Bruce, but like you mentioned earlier with a couple of your guests you had on your show recently, and just kind of other how sports players, coaches, those kinds of people are very outgoing or very want to talk about their faith.
Your first question, I think they both complement each other. I think there's a revival because more people are being outward of their faith. Listen, I'm proud of my Catholic Sports Radio podcast. I love when new people find it. I'm certainly appreciative for the people who listen to it regularly. But I'm Bruce Wawrzyniak. I'm not Father Mike Schmitz, for example. I'm not someone who is super high profile. So I think it helps when people like that, I mean, what Father Mike has done has been tremendous because I think that has helped with this revival. I think the more people like him who are using, I'll call it podcasts, but using podcasts, YouTube shows, whatever you want to call them, I think that's certainly helping. Let's face it, these are not the best of times economically for people. And so, I also heard a priest say one time in church that it's unfortunate how many people say, oh, well, I guess all we have left to do is pray. He was saying that should be the first action you take, not a last resort. So I think people are turning to prayer in challenging times, and it's kind of awakening them to the fact that, oh yeah, I can pray anytime. Coupling that with what I was just saying, that the more that athletes start to speak out about it, and it doesn't even have to be athletes. I mean, look at the success that Jonathan Rumi is having with The Chosen. So when someone like him speaks, it kind of wakens people up that, wow, this guy's Catholic. And remind me what the second question was. Does it excite me? It does excite me because, I get so jazzed about talking to a new guest every week to begin with, because I'm so blessed to have that front row seat that I get to hear every episode, and I get to hear every word of every episode. So I get to hear everybody's testimony. And so the more that there's kind of this demand out there, and the more that there's this interest, this curiosity, it excites me, because I already have the spark to want to keep on going with Catholic Sports Radio. I've never missed a week in more than 7 years of doing it. And people say, do you think you'll give it up soon though? And I think, why? Why would I? No, I'd miss out on some really cool stories. And, when I get some of these guests that I think, wow, how did I get him? How did I get her? Because they're, relatively high profile. That excites me. And I think, well, this could lead, right? So now we're coming full circle with the beginning when you asked me about getting guests. And so if I can get these high profile people to turn me on to other high profile people, I mean, you hope that there's going to be this snowball effect. So it's kind of that excitement within the unknown.
Sure. Yep. No, I can see that point. I mean, I have that too with just the show here too. Is even when people like you come back, it's always good to see them and hear what they've been up to lately. And so I'll make this the last question for you, Bruce. Is that about going back to your show? Have you had guests on twice, or have they all been new guests on for the whole 7 years?
It's been exceptionally rare that I've had a guest on twice. Wow. I remember early on, somewhere in the first 100 episodes, there was someone that I had on twice because she was, I guess I'll say, she was close enough. She was not a sports psychologist, but she was close enough that I thought it would be fascinating to do with her what you and I have sort of been doing, and to talk around the behaviors of people, right? The person who goes to church in the morning on Sunday and then comes home and they're a raving lunatic a few hours later watching an NFL game. I absolutely can count on one hand how many people have been on twice. Part of that is my desire to get as many new stories out there as I can. I think some of it could also be a criticism of my format, that we do cover, I don't want to say everything, but typically I find myself going from, hey, tell us about where you were born and raised and what the family size was and the upbringing, the Catholic faith in your household. And then you did this in high school, and then you played college sports over here. And, I kind of feel like, well, we kind of covered everything in the first one.
Sure.
But, I think when the day comes, when I start to fear that, oh my gosh, the potential guest list, I have a Microsoft Excel sheet that's called potential guests. I think when that starts to become thin, maybe I will revisit some of the past guests and say, it's been a long time. This person's obviously had new developments in their life in the last X number of years. He or she was a good interview. Let me bring them back.
Sure. Yeah. Wow. Great stuff. And I mean, that's really, really rare. I mean, to have that many guests on and only have a few come back twice. I mean, just, because there's so many new guests you're having on. That's really, really cool. I mean, just say that to you. So congratulations on that, because it's
Thank you.
really, really well done.
Thank you. There was
So-
somebody who was on the show that recently wrote to me and said, here's a few people that I think you should consider having on. And I wrote back and I said, thanks. But just so you know, so-and-so who was on the list, he's been on the show before. So I said, so he'll be a no,
Nice.
but I'll look at the others.
Oh, that's always nice to have. Wow. And actually, for everyone who's watching this on via YouTube, Spotify video, Facebook, up in the left-hand corner is actually Bruce's QR code to his website. So if you're watching this on your laptop when you're supposed to be working, or on your TV, if you're sick or something, scan that quickly before we end the show, and that QR code goes right to a link right to his website. We'll also have the link to his website down below in the show notes below as well. Bruce, it's been a very pleasure again, sir. Thank you again for your time, your flexibility, your willingness to come back on my show. I really appreciate it. Really appreciate your stories, the advice, inspiration, the time that you gave to us today. So thank you very much, sir.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Happy to do it. Thank you.
All right, Bruce Wawrzyniak from Catholic Sports Radio. Check him out. And until next time, folks, put Catholic faith before sports. And it should be faith, family, friends, sports. Put it that way. Until next time, stay in the state of grace, go to the sacraments, and we'll see you next week on Catholic Table Talk.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Catholic Table Talk podcast, where everything Catholic is on the table. Don't forget to subscribe to Catholic Table Talk on your favorite podcast platform to get new episodes delivered directly to you every Thursday at 9 a.m. Eastern.